Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. Today's video will be doing a NUNU guide for Season 10. So this guide is going to be designed for either if you're new to NUNU, new to jungling, or playing jungle, or playing League in general, or if you just want to optimize your NUNU play if you've already been playing for a little bit around how to play it in Season 10. Then this video will give you all the tools you need to do exactly that. Before we get right into the video, big shout out to Micah Atzem. Not quite if I'm saying your name right, but he commented asking about some Nocturne stuff. I gave him some information about that. But he also asked a little bit about NUNU, so I thought I'd make this video for everybody, mainly because I wanted to make it, but also hopefully it can help you out, Micah. So anyways, with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Alright, first things first, let's talk about your runes. So I have the rune page pulled up. I'm aware that there's a weird precision tree setup that you can go that's a little bit more out there and a little bit more niche, where if you're going the damage-oriented NUNU, which I would not recommend going unless you're very experienced at the champion, and it's highly situational and a little bit of a bait. You can do the Conqueror setup and do some extreme healing AP-esque builds, but it's not very consistent, and it's not the standard way to play NUNU. So we're going to talk about the most consistent, standard way to play NUNU. And it's what all the pros do and all that good stuff. So we're going to do the Resolve setup. So with the Resolve setup, your keystone's going to be Aftershock. So we're going to be taking Aftershock. The Aftershock was reworked a little bit, and honestly, it's kind of a nerf on a lot of junglers because it's weaker in the early game, but up more often, and then it's a little bit stronger with scaling items, like your scaling health items, which you're going to be building on NUNU. But on NUNU, it's actually kind of nice because a lot of times when you're playing NUNU, you can gank a side lane, and then by the time you're done with that gank, your W is going to be back up. And you can actually just roam straight down to the mid lane with your river control that NUNU is so good at getting. You can just roam down to the mid lane, and your Aftershock a lot of times will already be back up. So NUNU actually benefits from the Aftershock change, whereas a lot of other Aftershock junglers actually got a little bit nerfed because the Aftershock change is mainly for, trading in lane as supports and uptime for champions like NUNU. So Aftershock's going to be your best bet there. Our second row of runes, we have Font of Life taken. Font of Life is going to be great because it applies on all of your abilities except for your Q. So Font of Life will go active and give the healing stack on all abilities except for your Q for your team. So it can actually be pretty impactful, especially when you get to those late game fights, and actually matter a lot and synergizes with the rest of your setup. Alternatively, you could take Demolish if you wanted to, especially if you plan on prioritizing Rift Heralds and get some extra plates for your team in the early game. Can also be pretty decent on NUNU. Getting the next row of runes, we have Bone Plating. Bone Plating is going to be your best bet here. It's super consistent to take. You do not want to take Second Wind. You do not want to take Second Wind. You can take Extreme Conditioning if you'd like, but Bone Plating is just a little bit more consistent because it's going to be active earlier in the game, and you're going to be making a lot of plays on NUNU in the early game, and getting in a little tussles with enemy junglers and mid laners and all that good stuff. So Bone Plating is just a little bit more consistent. Okay, on the bottom row, this is very important, is to take our middle row Revitalize. So Revitalize is going to synergize super well with your Fauna Life when you take Fauna Life. It's also going to synergize amazingly with your Q and the rest of the rune setup. So it'll give you additional healing on your Q, which is going to be highly impactful in fights, especially with the rest of our rune setup. And will also benefit other healing effects if you build a Spirit Visage, which is part of the most builds. You build a Spirit Visage, it's going to synergize super well with that, and it's pretty consistent on NUNU. Alternatively, you could take any of the other three and they'd be fine, but Revitalize is one of the parts that makes NUNU very strong in the current meta. Alright, looking over, we're going to take our Domination secondary. You can take a couple of other things if you'd like to not take Domination. Again, on all junglers, you can take Inspiration and get the free boots, but honestly, it's much better to just take Domination in almost all scenarios because the way Ravenous Hunter and Cheap Shot synergizes with NUNU's kit is pretty insane. The only drawback to this rune setup is that you do not have Tenacity built into the rune, so it's going to kind of pinch you into building Tenacity boots almost every single game unless the enemy has no CC. Okay, but we're going to take Cheap Shot. Cheap Shot will apply on all of your abilities except for your Q, much like your Font of Life. So it's going to be really consistent in fights, give you a little bit of extra damage, whereas otherwise NUNU is mostly a tank champion. Okay, for Ravenous Hunter is going to proc on all of your abilities. So once you have 5 stacks and comboed with Revitalize, can do some really insane healing on NUNU, especially if you get a couple activations every Q in a fight. You'll look like you're about to die, and then NUNU will just heal 50% of his HP back when you have all this rune set up. It's pretty insane. I'm sure if you played a couple games, you've seen NUNU heal like crazy, and put everybody off tilt. You know what I mean? So that's going to be a great setup for NUNU right there. On our little stat runes, we're going to take attack speed, which is going to be pretty standard on almost every single jungler. We're going to take our adaptive damage, which is going to be standard as well, and then armor for our bottom line, and that's mainly for jungle camps, especially in the early game. You feel very impactful. It keeps you very, very healthy. But again, if there's 4 AP threats on the enemy team, then you can't just take the MR runes and just, your first clears are going to be a little bit less healthy. But on NUNU, you don't mind all that much anyways. All right, now let's talk about your items. So looking at your items here, your first thing you're going to be taking first off is going to be your skirmishing saber. So skirmishing saber is super important for NUNU as it helps a little bit with your 1v1s, your skirmishing. Whereas NUNU isn't super amazing at 1v1s, especially in the early game. He's more of a combo champion that he does super well with other champions. So it's going to help a lot with your 1v1s where otherwise, you might die, and NUNU has a hard time just killing opponents in the first place. But if they want to play an elongated fight, you can stall it for your teammates to get there. Or if you can get a second rotation of your abilities, you can actually kill out the enemy, whereas you otherwise think you wouldn't be able to do. Boost Smite is just mostly not needed on NUNU because you have so much chase down potential anyways with your slows in your kit and your knock up and your ultimate and all the good stuff. A lot of times you really just don't even need extra chase potential, but it can be okay. But Red Smite's going to be your best bet. Obviously, you're going to be taking Center Hook here. You can do some weird stuff with some AP setups, but we're not really going to talk about the AP build today because that is very non-standard. Cool, so that's what we're going to take. We're going to take our Cinder Hulk with our Skirmishing Saber. So the rest of the core items we have here, you can build them in any order that you want, but this is going to be pretty core to every game. So our Dead Man's Plate right here is going to synergize super well with, giving you that extra chase down potential, and additional movement speed added on will increase the speed of your W and increase the range of your W whenever you're rolling your ability, and we'll get into abilities in just a minute. So that's going to increase the distance and increase the speed of your big snowball that they're going to be rolling down the lane. Okay, next we have Stone Plate. So Stone Plate is super, super good, especially whenever you combo it with your ultimate. So if you use your Stone Plate before you use your ultimate, it increases your max damage or max health. And then when you use your ultimate scales with your maximum health, and it'll give you an additional large shield. So whenever you get in the middle of fights, people burn their CC, you pop your Stone Plate, you pop your ultimate, and then you can wait out your Stone Plate, and then pop your ultimate when your Stone Plate goes inactive, and it'll apply that big burst of damage without reducing the damage that you would normally get reduced with Stone Plate, because you just get the Stone Plate to make you beefier while you channel your ultimate, and then you finish off your ultimate when it wears off, and you'll still do that big damage. If you don't end up timing that right, it's fine. Main purpose of NUNU in fights is to provide zone control, slowing, and a little bit of damage. He's really not the main damage dealer in fights. If he is, it's, you're in a tough game. All right, the next item we have is Spirit Visage. So Spirit Visage is going to combo really, really well with this build setup, with all the healing built into the runes, and with your Q, it's going to combo super, super well. By the way, none of these items are necessary to NUNU. It's just these items are going to be really good in most games. You can switch out this item with our adaptive helm. Sometimes, depending on the matchup, if they have like Zyra, Brand, that type of stuff, then it might be a good idea to switch it out if those are the carries on the enemy team. They're the ones that are fed. It can be a good idea to switch that item out in that place, and then maybe build Spirit Visage later if you really wanted to. But that's going to be your best bet right here, but just build Spirit Visage. On your boots, most of the time you're going to want to build Tenacity boots, since we have no Tenacity innately built into the runes. So it's going to be really good on NUNU. If you don't have any Tenacity and they have a lot of CC on the enemy team, it's going to be really bad. It's going to feel really bad playing NUNU, especially like Morgana players, stuff like that. You're going to be stuck in one place, feeling kind of silly, not able to do anything. So Tenacity boots are going to be your best bet. But also, you can build Tabbies if the enemy has no CC. They have a lot of AD threats. Then you can build Tabbies as well. You just want the big beefy boy boots, but you want to really focus on having Merc Treads is going to be better. Alrighty, so some solid items over here. So I already talked about the adaptive helm when you want to build it. It's a solid item to build on NUNU. We have a Randuin's Omen. It's going to be very solid, especially if they have two crit threats. If they have a standard AD carry like Caitlyn, they have a Yasuo in the mid lane. Then we can build this instead of our Dead Man's Plate. Even though we love the Dead Man's Plate, we can build this instead, or maybe just build them both in the kit if they have a lot of AD threats, and that'll be fine as well. Knight's Vow, I have this on the list, but if you're just learning the champion and you're not playing with other players, Knight's Vow is pretty weird. So Knight's Vow is a super good item on NUNU. especially if you're playing around your AD carry quite a bit and you don't have a tank support. You can build a Night Spell and make your AD carry a lot more beefier, especially if you're pretty behind and your AD carry is really ahead. Then you can just add this in the build anywhere, and it's gonna feel pretty nice, especially if your AD carry, just keeping them alive. And you can just play Peel Duty, Zone Control, build this, and keep your AD carry alive, and just help them carry the game. So you can build that on him. We have Abyssal Mask here. You can build this late into the build if you'd like, so it increases NUNU's damage, especially if you have multiple AP threats on your team. Let's say you have a Vlad top, and like an Orianna mid, then you can build this on NUNU, and it's going to help a lot with helping Vlad deal a lot more damage, especially, and help yourself build a little bit more damage. And it'll it synergizes with your Cinderhulk as well, because that applies as magic damage. Then you have Warmogs. Last, Warmogs is good on all tank junglers. If you build your core items and then you build this afterwards, it's going to make you very beefy, especially when it synergizes with that stone plate active. It's going to feel very, very, very nice. All right, looking over at situational items, we have our Righteous Glory here. So Righteous Glory is going to feel pretty fun with if you're rolling your snowball down the lane and you get it active once you get near your enemy, it's going to increase your movement speed. Or if you want to just knock up somebody and then use the additional movement speed to get into place near more enemies to where you can apply your ultimate when your W is on cooldown, it's going to feel pretty nice. It's a little bit more niche because the other items that are in your build already synergize so well with NUNU, but this item can be pretty solid on it as well. After this, we have a bunch of AP items because you do have some pretty insane AP scaling on some of your abilities, and you can just add this into your build, especially if you think you got a 1v9 or something like that. You can add this into your build. Liandry's is probably one of the best items in the entire game, and it synergizes super well with NUNU, so a lot of times I'll just go this item last item. I do not have it in the example final build, but you can just insert it anywhere there in the build. Really, it's after 3 items, you can just insert it in there, and it synergizes with all of your abilities. It's pretty nuts, and it'll help you deal so much more damage. Liandry's is one of the best items in the game. It's insane. So you can build that if you'd like. Additionally, we have a couple more items. So Zhonya's just helps a lot with your zone control. I build Zhonya's on NUNU sometimes, especially if I'm having to 1v9 the game. Then I'll build Liandry's, Zhonya's, and then the rest will be full tank items, whereas these items are pretty tanky and will help you with zone control. So a lot of times you'll go in, you'll do your big combo, you'll ult, you'll chomp someone down, and then you might be stuck there for a second and your Q is on cooldown, so you just pop your Zhonya's. It'll buy the time for your Q to be back on cooldown, and you can stall it so long while having some damage items. So I like inserting that in my build a lot of the times. I do not have it in the example final build, but once you start messing around, you can find out where you can fit in AP items. You can fit those in a lot of places. All right, next we have the oh my gosh, I wanted to call that Abyssal Mask. Banshee's Veil. They changed the names of these things. This used to be called Abyssal something. So Banshee's Veil. So Banshee's Veil is going to be your standard. If you're against a lot of if they're against a lot of AP threats, you want to have a little bit of AP in your build. You want to block the shield as you're rolling in. Can synergize a little bit with NUNU's kit as you're rolling in. You're playing against, for example, someone like Morgana, like I did in the game that you were watching, that game that's in the background. If you have a Banshee's Veil, it'll block the Q as you're going in, and it can give you a little bit more room to play with. But usually don't ever build this item unless the whole entire enemy team is AP threat, and you can just insert this in the build somewhere, especially if you want to have fun. But I don't recommend this item overall, but it definitely can fit into your build in some situations. All right, our example final build, we're going to be having our Skirmisher Saber, Cinderhulk, our Merc Treads, our Deadmans, our Spirit Visage, our Stone Plates, and our Warmogs. Again, you can kind of move any of these items around. The first 4 items are pretty standard, and your boots as well are all pretty standard, but you can insert a lot of these situational items in there. NUNU has a pretty flexible build path, but these items all synergize with this kit, and you can add in the AP items if you want. But here's the example build path. If you go by this, this build will be solid in 90% of your games will be solid. But again, remember, once you start getting used to NUNU and stuff like that, you can start moving items around where it makes sense, especially just based off the game. Like I said before, if there's a Brand Zyre on the enemy team, then maybe you want to fit an Adaptive Helm in here somewhere, or Rise on the enemy team. Maybe fit an Adaptive Helm in here rather than a Spirit Visage, or maybe just both if they have a lot of AP threats. Then you can fit it into the build. Okay, now let's talk about NUNU's abilities. The first thing we're going to talk about is his passive. So NUNU's passive is a little bit weird, especially if you just start to play the game and you haven't read the abilities. You just see it happen. It's a little bit strange. So what will happen is as NUNU, if you attack a large monster or a large minion or an enemy champion, then what will happen is NUNU will gain a small additional attack speed and movement speed as well as another ally with the highest attack speed. It prioritizes the next ally with the maximum attack speed that is near Nunu will also gain this benefit as well. So you get movement speed, a small movement speed buff, and attack speed, and then Nunu's attacks will also cleave similar to like a Titanic Hydra. So you'll cleave in a cone, and so it's pretty nice for clearing jungle camps. The important thing about this is Nunu, that effect cannot apply onto the same unit twice within a time period. So, but it can apply. So let's say you hit an enemy champion and then you hit another enemy champion, it can reapply and then stack up very briefly. So it can reapply if you're hitting multiple champions, but it cannot reapply on the same champion within one combat sequence. So yeah, it's not really something you play around very hugely, but it helps definitely with your jungle clear and all that good stuff, especially into the early game. Okay, after that, we have our Q. So our Q is going to be our little feast, our little devour, a little thing like that. It's going to be the core ability that we're going to play around as Nunu. So it's what makes Nunu a pretty potent jungler with his jungle clearing. It makes him a decent counter jungle champion and an objective clear. So your Q will deal true damage to neutrals, and then you can also damage enemies as well with it, and it will heal you pretty substantially. So it'll heal more versus minions than it will against other enemy champions, but it'll still heal quite a bit, and it heals 50% more whenever Nunu is below 50% health. So it's going to heal a lot more whenever you're below your health. So sometimes in fights, especially in the early game fights, you can maybe hold it a little bit longer until you're a little bit lower health, and then make sure you get the health back. And remember that that'll also synergize with your Revitalize. When you're below a certain amount of health, it's going to heal additionally after that. So you can synergize with that as well. So sometimes when you're in fights, maybe it's a smart idea to hold it, especially if your cooldowns are pretty long in the early game, then that's going to be fine too. So it deals a large chunk of true damage. It scales from like 300 to 980. Most of the game, it's going to do more than your smite. So this is going to be the ability that you max first, and most of the game it's going to deal more with your smite. It's very important to learn the timing of it, because when you press the ability, it has a slight delay, whereas your smite is instantly. So you can time jungle camps or neutrals to where you cast your Q, and when the Q goes through, you can press your smite, and it'll chomp and smite at the same time. You know, in the late game, that'll deal almost 2,000 damage with just your Q and your smite. All right, next ability we're going to talk about is the biggest snowball ever, which is your W. So what that ability is going to do is it'll start a channel that'll be building up a big snowball. You'll see it. It's similar to a Scion ultimate, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And then you'll be pushing a snowball in front of you, and you can steer it in directions similar to a Scion ultimate. Learning how to steer takes a little bit of time, but after you do, you can actually like wind around some corners and do some pretty nutty things with it. Anyways, you roll this snowball forward, and when you make contact with a large monster, a large minion, a large summoned minion like a Tibbers, or an enemy champion, then it'll knock up whoever's there. It'll knock up whoever's there, and will stun them briefly. And also, that's how you apply your Aftershock, right? That'll be one of the big ways you apply your Aftershock. So you'll roll the snowball in, it'll hit them, it'll pop up. Important thing to know is you can release it early. So if you release it early, it will travel a short distance afterwards. If you release it early and there are minions in the way, it'll blow up on normal minions or normal monsters rather than the larger monsters. So if you release it early, because it's going to hit them, you got to make sure you're close enough to them that it won't just knock up the minions and not knock up them. So it's very important that if you release, you got to be close enough. But a lot of times you can just release early if you get close enough and you're not going to hit them. Then you can just start to use your snowballs, or your small snowballs, rather than use your big snowballs. So this is going to be your big ability that you'll use to get river control. So like, for example, I said you clear Scuttle Crab super easily with your Q, so you can kill Scuttle Crab. You know, use your W to go for a gank top. The gank is successful or unsuccessful, but then you can just walk right back into river and then do another biggest snowball ever into the mid lane and then get that gank there. So that's why Nunu is so good for river control, is set up with this ability. You can also do some pretty unique gank patterns that we'll talk, a little bit at the end of the video, but you can actually gank from behind the lane because you can just start rolling, get a bunch of movement speed going, and all of a sudden you're in the lane and they can't run away because you're Nunu and you're a big boy and you got a big snowball. So they can't get away. Cool. Now we're gonna talk about NUNU's E. So NUNU's E is it's like a small skill shot. It's weird. But essentially what it'll do is you'll throw 3 snowballs in front of you, and then you can reactivate that ability twice. When you hit a unit with the snowball, it will apply a short 1-second slow. You cannot, if they are already slowed, you cannot reapply the slow. But if it fades, you can reapply the slow when it's over. So you'll apply a slow to whoever you hit with it. It's a small skill shot. You have to actually aim it around your champion. And an enemy that is hit by it is now marked as snowbound. And once NUNU completes using the ability all 3 casts, then you'll see a little indicator around NUNU will explode. And if an enemy is marked with the snowball and is inside of that area, they'll be rooted for a short duration, scaling with your level in it. So it's very short at the beginning. It's 0.5 seconds, and then we'll scale up to 1.5 seconds. This is going to be an ability that you max second, and this is going to be an ability that you'll play around a lot. Once you're on enemy champions, you'll root them a lot of times before you use your ultimates. If you're able to get them rooted, then it guarantees you're going to deal a lot of damage with your ultimate, or you're going to get a big chomp down on them most of the time. So this is going to be important to play around, and it'll take a little bit to get used to how to use this ability correctly. But again, you'll throw your snowballs out in front of you. It'll mark a snowbound mark upon them, and then there'll be a circle indicator around NUNU. When that explodes, it'll stun anybody who's snowbound mark within that little circle. All right, now let's talk about NUNU's ultimate. So what NUNU's ultimate is going to do, it's a channeling ultimate. So you'll press it, and then you'll need to not press anything else after that, or you're going to cancel it. So you'll press your ultimate. It makes a large circle around NUNU. It can be canceled by CC. So if an enemy CCs you, it'll instantly cancel the ultimate. So you'll cast the ultimate. It'll make a large slowing area around NUNU. It scales from 0 to 95% slow based on how long you've been channeling it for. And then additionally, it'll deal more damage based on how long you are channeling for as well. You can cancel the ability at any time, but if you cancel it early, it won't deal nearly as much damage as if it channeled for a long time. Something else about this, it'll grant you a shield. So it'll grant you a shield at the beginning whenever you cast it, and that shield scales with HP and levels, obviously. So it scales with your bonus HP. So the more HP you have, the more bigger the shield's going to be in fights, and that's why the tank build is really good. The base damage on this ultimate is pretty insane, especially late game. It's something like 1200 like that. So the base damage at maximum channel is pretty insane. It'll, half health any carry in the late game just by the ultimate itself if you can get the full channel and get on top of them. It does have some insane AP scaling, which is why some people will build some AP items on NUNU. That's why a lot of times I will build Leandre's on the last time on NUNU, because that's 250% AP scaling, which is probably the biggest AP scaling ability in the entire game. So it's pretty crazy. That's why one AP item just built in there, especially Leandre's, because Leandre's will apply when you're slowing them, can be pretty nutty and can be pretty effective. So the main thing around that ability is it just offers you so much zone control. Even if you don't actually hit the enemy and damage with it, you might force a lot of flashes or just control an entire zone of area so to protect your team, or to just kind of keep their team in place so your team can kill them. So it just offers so much zone control and all that good stuff. All right, let's talk about your skill order. So you're going to max your Q. And then you'll max your E. So you'll take your Q level 1, then you'll take your E level 2. Then your W level 3. You're going to max your Q first, and you'll max your E, and then you'll do your W last. Obviously, put points into your ultimate whenever it comes up. All right, let's talk about how you do your actual jungle path. So your jungle path on NUNU. So NUNU clears the jungle extremely fast and can do basically any path you want to. So a couple paths that are pretty decent. NUNU does really well at clearing the blue side jungle camps because his Q is super effective on them because they're smaller sized camps, whereas it's not super fun queuing the little baby raptors. But the raptors are fine to do as well. So a pretty standard clear, just start on your red buff, do your wolves, gromp, and blue buff, or wolves, blue buff, then gromp, right? When you complete that, that should be completed around 2 minutes 55 seconds or so. And then after that, you can get a gank off before you fight for the scuttle crab, and NUNU has such great scuttle crab control that you'll be able to get over there. So what that path will do is you'll do 4 camps, you'll be level 3, you can get a gank off just before you can do the scuttle crab on your side of the map, is the effectiveness of that gank. If you want to time your jungle clear to where you'll end up right when the scuttle crab spawns, then you could just do a slightly different clear where you do a 5 camp clear, where you'll do your red buff, your raptors, wolves, gromp, or blue Gromp, and then you'll be at the Scuttle Crab right when it spawns, or just around that time. And you can do that path instead if you'd rather do that. But I much more prefer being able to get a gank off in the early game, especially on NUNU. Additionally, you could just do a much quicker jungle path query where you could just do red buff, blue buff Gromp. And then look for a gank top, look for or whichever side you're on, look for a gank in a side lane, then look for a gank mid, and then do the Scuttle Crab. Can be an effective way to play the game. Also, you could just full clear if you wanted to, but again, NUNU is pretty powerful in the early game, so it's pretty important to get your ganks off early in the game if you can. There's no reason why you shouldn't. And then you can just full clear on the next clear, and that's fine as well. Important to note, you can do any of those jungle clears reversed if you wanted to, but the fun thing about NUNU is he can do a lot of really versatile jungle clears because of how healthy he is in the jungle with his Q and his healing on that. All right, let's talk about some neutral control and some mid to late game. So NUNU is super good at taking neutrals, so if you want to prioritize neutrals, it's really decent on NUNU. He can do it super early. You can do it really after first back if you really want to. If you don't know how to set up neutrals correctly, that's a topic for a different video. But if your neutrals are set up correctly, NUNU is super great at taking neutral objectives. Basically on respawn if it's a good timing to take it, and you have lane priorities and all that good stuff, which is really a topic for a different video. Then NUNU can be a really efficient neutral clear. And so you can set that up if you really want to prioritize early dragons or early rifts. I think he's super great at prioritizing early rift heralds. He does so much damage to it, and you can get a super fast rift herald and get some big bonuses for your team in the early game. All right, let's talk about how to play in the mid to late game and team fights. So big thing about NUNU, you can be a primary engage on NUNU. That's fine. He functions super well as a secondary engage. The main thing that he offers is zone control. So zone control with that big fatty ultimate and rolling that snowball in and doing all the good stuff. That's why Stoneplate and all those tanky items are so good at him, because in the late game when you're in team fights, you're just this big beefy boy who's just kind of walking around and slowing people and making big areas where they can't walk through. That's your job in the fights. Your job is to soak damage and to create zone of control. So NUNU is so scary at creating zone control. That ultimate is so huge, and it's very important to utilize your ultimate after enemies have burned their CC, and it's just really effective. That's why the tank build is so effective. He's what a frontliner is supposed to be. He can engage. His engage isn't super consistent, but a lot of times you can just roll your snowball in, and they'll have to move out in weird directions, and then you're just in the middle of their team, and you can just do NUNU things. You can pop your stone plate. You can get your aftershock proc with your E. If you don't get your aftershock proc, just proc your stone plate early. So your main job is just be a big beefy boy, soak some damage to your team, and then do zone of control. So do zone of control. Additionally, if you have another person who can play frontline and do that stuff, then it's very beneficial just to play peel for your carry. If you have this Caitlyn that has 15 kills and she's just going to siege down the game, but they got a Kha'Zix on the enemy team, then maybe it's not a bad idea to just hug your Caitlyn, and if she gets in the bad situations, just CC the Kha'Zix or CC the enemy assassin or something like that. Again, you create that giant area of zone of control, that big circle. So if you're just hugging, let's say your carry, and the enemy jumps on your team, and you just make this giant zone of control that gives a 99% slow to them, or 95% slow to them, then your Caitlyn can just escape, and you can do a lot of damage, and then she can start dealing damage, all that good stuff. So you can play peel duty, or you can play big beefy boy duty, and just be in the middle of fights, just cause chaos, and do all that good stuff. Okay, let's talk about some counter picks. So big thing about NUNU, it's very difficult to kill people in the 1v1s, especially in the early game. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's hard to kill people. So it's weird when you talk about counters. NUNU can get out of most situations either by knocking up his enemy or using his W to escape. So you should be able to get out of most situations if you get into a bad situation. Skirmishing junglers will beat him out in 1v1s. Champions like Udyr, champions like Zen Zhao, champions like Lee Sin, if he lands his abilities, can feel a little scary, especially, it's hard to time your Q well enough when he's doing his execute. So, you want to avoid 1v1s, but even if you get in 1v1s, they're not hard to deal with. And a lot of times you can just stall out time long enough for your allies to get there, and NUNU is super exceptional in 2v2s. So, big advice is you really don't want to 1v1 people. It's pretty difficult to kill them unless you're really far ahead. It is somewhat difficult to kill your enemies in the 1v1. I'm not saying you can't do it, but after your one rotation, you really don't have anything left. You're just kind of a big beefy boy who just slaps people around. But it's kind of hard to do a lot after your first rotation. If you're able to get 2 rotations off and you're able to stall, then you definitely can kill people, but it's very hard to 1 rotation people, unlike, you know, champions like Xin Zhao or Lee Sin or Udyr can 1 rotation somebody. But it's very hard for you to do it by yourself. Until you have a bunch of take items, you can get multiple rotations and you can kill people in the 1v1. But NUNU just does really well at comboing with his teammates and just stalling out for time, slowing people down, just being a pest. You can really do a lot of stuff in 2v2s, but you don't win a lot of 1v1s versus scrimmage junglers, but the key thing to remember is if you do get involved in 1v1, it's pretty easy to escape either by knocking up the enemy and stunning them and just walking away, or just stunning them and then rolling away with your big old snowball, you know, and stalling for time so your teammate can arrive and can help you out with that situation. Alright, here we are in game. We're going to be doing some combos on NUNU. So NUNU is a pretty extremely straightforward tank champion. So it's kind of weird talking about combos, and I mainly talked about a lot of how to utilize the abilities earlier in the video. So kind of weird, but there are some things you should know. So something that's important right here is something we're going to talk about is one of the gank patterns. So a lot of times on most champions, you're going to gank from the river. You're going to gank from here. You know, that's how you're going to gank on most champions. You could definitely do that on NUNU, but it can get kind of weird sometimes when you're ganking from the side. So a lot of times you can just gank from behind the lane. So you stay just out of vision, and then you start building it up. And you can actually just lane gank, something you can't normally do on other champions. You stun them down. I'm silenced. Yay. Chomp. You can use your chomp at any point in that fight. I was just using it kind of late because I was exhausted for whatever reason. So that's one of the unique gank patterns that you can do that's pretty unique to NUNU. You can actually lane gank. But additionally, if you wanted to gank from the side, look something like this. Auto makes your screen look like this, and you kind of move this around all you want. Anyways, cool. All right, the other thing we wanted to talk about with your snowball is that you can release it early. So if you're channeling it, and let's say there's an enemy there, but I wanted to hit him, and I want to actually fight this enemy right here and get my aftershock proc. The enemy I really wanted is right here, but I'm not going to be able to, you know, drift into him, so I can knock him up, and then I can just leave it and start hitting there. But most of the time, you just want to go straight into them if it's going to hit them, rather than releasing it early, because they could change direction. You could just change direction with them. Okay, cool. So another thing we're going to talk about something with your ultimate. So you can actually channel your ultimate from inside the bush. If you're outside of the enemy vision, then they will not be able to see. They will not be able to see you channeling it, and they can have a rough surprise whenever they see you. We channel our ultimate. Boom! And then we can apply the entire damage rock, and they won't be able to see it. If I was able to tog off Fog of War for myself, if I was an enemy, they wouldn't actually be able to see me channeling the ultimates. Additionally, you can do stuff like this, where you do that, and then you can flash in the range, and it'll root them at the end of it. So you can apply the snowbound, and if they get out of your range, you can flash, and it'll apply. So it'll look something like this again. You know, I applied the snowbound, they escaped me, oh no! And then I can flash to them, and it'll root them as well. So you can do something like that. Additionally, if you want to run away from your enemy, I kind of talked about it a little bit, is you're like, haha, haha! You know, you're in a 1v1 and you want to get away, root them, and then you just start rolling out, boys. We roll out, boys. As well as if, you know, an enemy's chasing you. If an enemy's chasing you and they get in front of you because they know you want to snowball out, kind of like when you play against Sion, it's going to be difficult for you to roll out because it's going to do that. So instead, you can just flash and start rolling out. That's something that you can do. Man, there was one more combo I wanted to talk about, but now I can't quite remember it. I mean, NUNU, guys, NUNU is so straightforward. He's one of the most basic champions. And the reason why his win rate is so high is because he's strong, and he's so easy to play. Boom, 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 whop, whop. I swear there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, I wanted to talk about the stone plate synergy. So if you get into a fight, let me refresh my aftershock. Oh wait, it's already refreshed. You get into a fight, you know, I get in, I get my aftershock proc, doing this stuff, and then I apply my stone plate, beefs me up while it's going through, and then by the time it ends, it'll apply the full damage. So you do have to wait like 1 second or so before you start channeling your ultimate, but you can have your stone plate active during your entire ultimate. So it'll look like this. You know, I pop my stone plate, I wait about a second, and I start channeling it. My stone plate will go gone, and then it'll pop. So if you wait 1 whole second, After you use your stone plate will be active, making you a big beefy boy, still applying your slow like it would normally, and then when it expires, it'll pop and blow up your enemies and deal a lot of damage. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it. Maybe I missed something on NUNU combos, but guys, it's just really simple. You roll into people, you throw snowballs at them, you chomp them, you slow them, you stun them, you knock them up, you try to get another rotation, you try to get in there, but if you can't get in there, you just keep trying, you keep walking forward, you keep pushing through, you keep healing, and that, guys, that's going to be it for this video. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure, and I don't know, whatever. I don't care what you do with that information. Hey, by the way, I've been leaving my socials in the description and the in the comment section. If you want to follow me on my socials, that's great. But if you don't, that's fine as well, honestly. But I have been streaming on Twitch a lot lately, and I don't play League a whole lot. I mostly play TFT when I stream. So if you'd like to watch that, and you can ask me any questions about League, or tell me what champion you want to see next, that can be fine as well if you want to talk like that. But if you just want to see me stream, I'll be streaming a whole lot. So that's in there. Also, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to. Because if a lot of you guys start following me on Twitter, I can actually post when I'm post on Twitter and update you guys on what champions I'm working on, rather than just kind of popping them up out of the blue. So if you'd like to do that, you can follow me on Twitter, and if I have enough of you guys start to follow, then I'll start updating it a little bit more and let you guys know when my guides, what guides are going to be coming out next and what I'm working on, so you guys can kind of know what to expect and all that good stuff. But again, all the stuff's optional. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm grateful that you guys came and watched the video, and I hope that it helps you guys learn and helps you guys play these champions a little bit better. So anyways, that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.